We are here. Welcome to Mindshift. I'm joined by my father, Erwin McManus, and our really, really good friend and longtime friend, Dan Bolton.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction. I know you've just flown in from Bali.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been getting the bronze skin comments. Like, you guys are Latino. I'm like, white boy looking at bronze up. And so Bali's been great. So my name's Dan. Live in Bali, from New Zealand, hence the accent.
Yeah.
I could go all the way back, but basically, grew up in New Zealand, single parent household, dropped out of school when I was 16. Actually, you guys won't know this. I was the youngest sex ed teacher in New Zealand. So at 16, I dropped out, and then I got drafted to go teach sex ed, despite not really knowing anything about sex.
Oh, so is that because you were an expert at 16 or what?
No. But it's so funny because it was like I was in schools. It was mainly like life choices and things like that.
Yeah.
But I was talking to people like 2 years younger than me.
Okay.
And so it was both an advantage and a disadvantage.
Yeah.
And it was around that time that I actually discovered you when you had a podcast, and churches were early on podcasts. Like now that you think about it, it's like 2006 having a podcast. It was like
super early adapter.
super
Adopter.
different. And so I was working at a retail store, and every morning I would be vacuuming up the store. I think you guys call it, you say vacuuming or hoovering?
Hoovering, no, vacuum.
Yeah, perfect.
Vacuum.
I was like, yeah. And so I'd be cleaning up the store, and I'd be listening to this guy speaking out of a nightclub in LA. And obviously got to meet you guys a couple of years later, and was a youth pastor through basically 18 to 28 years old. And then 5 years ago, stepped into the online space and have kind of been figuring it out from there, and started out doing everything for everyone, building websites, running Facebook ads, coaching people, and have since kind of refined what I'm doing and now kind of really help people build and monetize personal brands online.
That's amazing.
And married and 2 kids. I feel like I need to give lip a shout out.
Your wife's
Yeah,
an
in
amazing
case
wife.
she listens.
What are you doing?
What am I?
We have to shout her out so she keeps letting you come out.
My wife, my 2
Yes.
kids. No, but we just celebrated 11 years last Friday.
Amazing. How old are you when you got married?
We got married. I just turned 22. She was
wow.
21, and we've been together since we were 18. So I'm 33 now.
Okay.
Wow.
So
Amazing. That's incredible.
we were child bride and groom. In the classic Christian space,
So it seems like the classic Christian space where they marry you off for goats and cows and chickens. And New Zealand would be for sheep. And,
That's right.
Yeah. So you obviously you skipped over it because we know much more about your story, but you had a reinvention. You had to reinvent yourself maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and I think even in the last 4 or 5 years, I've reinvented myself multiple times. But I think it was really interesting. I definitely was not a die-hard, in my blood entrepreneur. But as I was a youth pastor, if you looked at my Kindle, if you looked at my library, it was like all of these business books and then like 10% about the stuff I should actually be learning about as a pastor. And so there was this sense of I wanted to create something. There was definitely an income element of that too. I was pretty broke throughout all of my years working at the church. And so there was that aspiration there. But what happened in 2018 when I finished up, I felt like I was going to be a pastor forever at that point. We were actually talking about planning a church, and we thought this is what we're going to do forever. But we came into 2018 and just intuitively felt like it was next chapter and another move. And I was waiting for this big neon light sign moment of like, this is what you're supposed to do now. And I was waiting for like a job offer or something like that. And I mean, dude, I dropped out of high school. I don't have any secondary education. And so there was no job offer on the table. And so I decided to employ myself. and so I started a business, and I was seeing all these Facebook ads at the time and things like that about social media marketing agencies. And so that's what I stepped into. But what I didn't realize at the time was 2 things that happened over that decade, and really even earlier than that, starting at 16. One, I'd spoken on stage probably 600 or 700 times. So that was a really cool part of my role at the church I was at, both with teenagers, with adults. And the other thing, and this sounds so minor, but as a youth pastor, I constantly had to be marketing to teenagers why they should come back the next week. And so it wasn't as easy as like, hey guys, we have this thing. It was like every week there was like promotions and, all the whole works. And so I'd done a lot of social media marketing in that way. And so there was a natural skill set that was there that could be used in business, but it was a huge evolution of identity. It was like everyone had seen me as this youth pastor for so long, and then I stepped into the business space and people were really confused. And this sounds like a joke, But I literally had people that just had no idea what I did. That the two most obvious answers was like, Dan's doing something super illegal online because he's just making money out of nowhere, or he's joined one of those pyramid schemes, like he's like a part of Amway or Avon or something like that.
I was confused. I had no idea, and it was COVID too, for a lot of it as well. So it was kind of this separation where I was used to seeing you maybe once a year or once every couple of years, and then you just kind of went dark, and then it was this marketing thing, and you'd post these things, and it was so, I had no idea what you were doing, and then at one point you moved to LA for a little bit, and we were launching the Art of Communication, and you're like, oh, that's what I do. And I was like, amazing, because it's not what I do. So let me ask you all the questions. And there was a series of, I don't know how long we did it, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, of just every Friday was like a breakfast burrito at this spot down the road, and we would just sit and talk for an hour or two, and you kind of would walk us through ideas, concepts, and kind of different strategies. And then it's been a year or two later, and it's I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad you're here. So
it's good to be here.
You reinvented your way back into our life.
That's right. You can't get rid of me.
No, we can't get rid of you. Yeah.
Well, I think we should also add the fact that you were volunteering your insight, your experience, your knowledge, and just because of your commitment to us. And there came a certain point where we just really, Aaron and I both went, wow, he's just adding so much value. We just have to hire him. And, so we made a shift. It didn't change strangely, it didn't change our friendship at all.
Right.
But we did make a shift where we brought you on our team, and, just as a consultant. And you're the first consultant we have ever hired, I think, probably. And pretty much.
Ever.
I'll claim it. That sounds great.
It's great. Yeah. It's amazing. And I mean, you're an incredible asset to the team. But I think bigger than that, you have like an incredible way of bringing value to situations. I think knowing you as like a youth pastor before, which is just so funny, right? Like it feels like a different lifetime ago. It feels like a lifetime ago, and it feels like a different life. Yeah. But you were always bringing value to every situation. So like, how did you carry that over from maybe the church world or kind of that background to then going, what was that crossover when you did reinvent yourself? What did that look like? Like, how did you find value and then bring it to people who didn't necessarily need it?
Yeah, so...
Or know they needed it?
Yeah, so if I go way back in the life story for a second. So I grew up in really turbulent family environments. My mom and dad split when I was 3 weeks old. I grew up with my single mother. When I was 10, 11, 12, I got heavy into drugs and drinking, and I had older brothers and sisters that, as we affectionately say, the underground economies. And even to this day, my brother is the leader of the biggest gang in our city. And so my life was going down a path really, really fast. And through getting a crush on the girl next door, quite literally, she invited me to church.
Okay.
And it was at the time I first experienced like male role models, like just dudes that didn't want anything from me, but just were there. And it was funny because they were so old to me at the time, but they were like 18 and 19, right? And so for me, that was so impactful that I realized that the value that someone could bring to a life when they were just selflessly helping, serving, loving. And that put me on a really strong path throughout my teenage years, because even though I dropped out of high school, it actually was more about my inability to live within the rules and the confines of school than it was about the education element or whatever. And so I fell on my feet really fast. I had a great job right away. And while everyone else was living the 16-year-old life, I was driving from city to city, helping our little church planting network with music and things like that. And so service really quickly became a part of my identity because of the way that I'd been served and impacted by so many other people. And so when I was in my 20s and living out this life of a youth pastor, on one side it made no sense to me because I had friends that were going to university, getting real world education, coming back with what looked like skills, and obviously had degrees, and they were getting jobs and buying houses, and my wife and I were like living week to week. But the way I just kept reconciling this was I am living beyond myself, which at least in this season seems to make a lot of sense. And to my core identity, it would just seem to be the reason I was put on this earth. And so I'll never forget finishing up my time as a youth pastor, and I'm sitting down with my boss at the time, and I said, I can't believe I'm not going to be a pastor anymore. This is so weird. And he's like, I don't think you get it. you're always going to be a pastor. And I just laughed and I was like, oh, that's great. And then I fully forgot about that for a couple of years. And when I say fully forgot about it, I mean, like, I didn't even try and serve people in the new thing. I was like, I want to make money. Like, I want to get some income. I want to build a business. And it wasn't until I got to this point where the business had grown so fast. I had a team of 13 people, but I was peak stressed. I was drinking every night. I was like, my life externally looked amazing. I was getting awards. I was getting accolades. Internally, I was crumbling. So much of it, I realized, came from the fact that I had lost my intention to live from a place of service. And so ironically, coming back to that place of service and really just figuring out, like, on a one-to-one level, how can I help people? How can I serve people? Ironically, that's brought me more money than I could ever imagine, right? Because there's no lack of people who have problems that they want solved. But also it's just brought so much deep meaning. And so I think it's like the reinventing myself has been less about becoming a new version of myself and more about remembering who I truly am, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it.
It's funny because when my first memories of you, you were the youth pastor at a church, and I still remember the pastor saying to me, because I brought you up because I felt you had a really clear talent, and he said, yeah, he's talented, but you know, he doesn't listen, or he's talented, but he's talented.
He goes rogue.
He's talented, but he makes me nervous. He's talented, but he has to grow. And I realized, and it's funny, I have a friend named Craig Rochelle.
Yeah, sick.
And we just finished doing his podcast together, and he kept talking about great leaders are always extremists. They have some area where they're an extremist.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was a part of your own your own expression without being aware of it. Because my sense of you is you really wanted to fit in.
Right.
You really wanted to contribute. Like, I did not experience you as dangerous, but definitely leadership experienced you as dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think it's because you were just naturally counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And so, I think you're in a great space because you're designed in a certain way where you're kind of supposed to create the universe around your life.
Right.
And because you're just not really designed to fit into already established structures. Yeah. That's why you didn't, I guess, finish high school. You're very smart. So clearly finishing high school wouldn't have been a challenge for you, except that you didn't do it the way everybody else thought you should do it.
Right.
And which is one of the reasons I like you. And I think it's one of the reasons you work so well in our team is we like aberrant thinking. We like people who think in unexpected ways, and that's just very natural to you. Mm. But you do it in a very kind, gracious, loving, human way. Mm. And I just think that's one of the things that's really interesting about you is that you think with a unique perspective, but you also do care about treating people kindly and well. I think that combination is very dynamic.
That's very kind of you to say. Can I ask a question on this? I think so often the people that I admire the most have an edge about them, an obsession, that unbalanced nature. And I think a lot of leaders and creatives have that especially. And then they step into the world and they realize that edge has rough parts that can rub against other people. Mm-hmm. So how do people maintain that level of uniqueness and edge and the positive sense of unbalance? Like I've been reading about Michelangelo, and that dude is wild. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know if you know this. So like in order to really understand how the human body works, so he could carve the statue of David, he just dissected dead people. And he dissected dozens and dozens and dozens until he understood every aspect of the tissue and the tendon and the way that this muscle connected to this muscle. Wild. And he did this at 19 years old, right? And so then from there, it was like every statue he did beyond that was just like 10x better than the last because he was so deeply obsessed and unbalanced. So I'm curious, like how do you think people can cultivate that sense of like obsession without taming their fire, putting it out, but also not be so disruptive they can't work with other people, work on teams, contribute in a way that's just beyond their own art?
I mean, right away with Michelangelo, what came to my mind is he's my kind of guy unless he starts dissecting living people. so I think there is a fine line. And
I find it so interesting because you look at the perception of it, right? Like Michelangelo now is a revered artist, someone who's created something that people travel all from around the world to come and see. But he hung out with dead people.
Well, not only that, it was illegal. It was illegal at the time, so he had to go through all these back alleys.
I'm pretty sure it's still illegal.
That
part's definitely still illegal.
No, it was even like more extreme. I can't remember what the superstition was around it, but like he had to fully go in. Like there was no scientific precedent for dissecting dead people basically at that time. So he was like groundbreaking in that. So that's what's so insane about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, imagine it's like, oh, there's Michael.
Yeah,
that guy hangs with dead people.
Yeah.
I just could not. I think that we have a hard time breaking through like other people's projection of our identities enough that like the expectations of other people that I could not imagine what it would be like to actually hang with dead people on a daily basis. But I guess we do it all the time. You know, if you live in LA, there's dead people walking around everywhere.
Yeah, but when I first heard Craig talking about that he looks for people who are extremists or have some kind of extreme expression, I immediately did think about Aaron. Going, a part of Aaron's huge challenge in life is when he's surrounded around people who are really normal, and they are really comfortable with normacy. They're really comfortable with status quo. He just moves into an intense version of himself, almost in a disruptive way, because he just has to disrupt the status quo, even if it's not a healthy way of disrupting it. And I think a part of leadership is realizing you are different than other people. You are obsessive. And I just heard someone else's talk saying, hey, and he's a follower of Jesus, saying, Jesus's model is different, than the people who are teaching you to be like Kobe Bryant or to be like Steph Curry or to be the best in the world. And that's okay, for them, but that's not okay for real life. And I thought, yeah, I don't agree. I actually think that you should be obsessive to live the life you're created to live. But obsessive doesn't mean that you're imposing your view of life on everyone else. Right. You really have to give people room and oxygen to live the life they're created to live, or the life they want to live, even if you don't think it's the life they're created to live. If someone wants less, it's not your job to demand that they want more. But I do think it's, in a sense, I think it's part of my calling to make people uncomfortable with average.
Right.
I'm okay with that. Yeah. And in any environment I'm in, I'm going to make sure the status quo is disrupted. I'm going to make sure that comfort and complacency is
I don't know if I believe you, to be honest. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that the videographer can get around the corner. But I don't know if I believe you, because I do actually think obsessive people are very much are oppressive people in their own way. Like we talked about this last night on the drive back from the game. I was like, how come it's not okay for you to like have other people do things in the way that they do them? You need them to do them your way, or think the way that you think. It disappoints you. It breaks your heart.
Okay, let's be clear.
It drives you crazy.
We're talking about speakers. I'm happy with speakers being who they are.
I'm starting to go
in their platforms. In their platforms. But when they come to a platform that I'm curating, I admit it. It does matter to me if I think that they're relevant for this space. Right. And it's hard for me. And I am obsessive about relevance in language and communication.
We're going to fight today. This is the day of violence.
It'd be good to have fight.
It'd be good.
We have Dan
So
here.
this is the way that this rolled out and played out. What we were talking about, so the arena has already happened, but next year's happening. So the October 10th and 11th.
And
12th. Or 11th and 12th. Mm-hmm. And he has already booked like 9 speakers for next year. Maybe 10. And I called him yesterday and I was like, hey man, no more. Because we made this problem this year, where he poked 14 people and there's not enough time slots in the day for these speakers, and we're like TED talking these things.
We have incredible speakers.
Incredible speakers.
Unreal.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm pulling up the thing because like the list is like so wild that it's like
Brendon Bouchard,
Donald Miller, Chris Doe, Dan Fleshman, Jimmy Rex, Sean Kelly, Will Guidardo. We cannot say his last name for our freaking life. But and I was like, hey, you've never ever booked a conference the year before the actual conference has started. Like, you've just never been this prepared. And I was like, do you like the business people more than you like the church speakers? And this is where this is how the fight unraveled.
And I think some of it is that in the business space, I just have a different filter,
right,
that I work from. But I have to admit, in the faith space, my filter is incredibly ruthless.
Yeah.
Because when I fill the room with people I care about who don't believe in God, how a person communicates faith can either bring them closer or push them further away.
Yeah. Well, I think it even goes beyond that, because I think I can say it. I'm the guest on the podcast, so you just can't have me back if I go too far. I think the problem is, as a former pastor, that pastors communicate and view the world in such a narrow way that even if they're talking at a business conference on a business topic, they're talking about it in a Christian way.
Yes.
So it's not even just that faith is then communicated in a way that's not relating to the person furthest from God or an outsider to this person. It's that the filter of the language they use and the way that they see people and the way that they communicate is through this really narrow filter of Christianity for many of them.
That's true, because a couple of the speakers that are really strong Christians, I didn't invite because their language is it's so insider language, right. and it's actually more rooted in cliches than it is in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. You're right. It's not just the way you talk about faith. It's the way you talk about life.
Yeah.
It's the way you talk about everything, and it becomes really challenging for me. So yes, I am obsessive about those things.
But you have no expectation from these business guys. You're not even worried about them at all.
I'm not. It's really funny. It's true.
You're only worried about the one guy that you know is a Christian. Is a Christian.
I'm trying to think which one, but
we both know him. He's our good friend.
And, but
the expectation changes. So why is that?
Well, I think for one thing is that in the business world, it's very like ground zero. Are they doing it well? You know, if it's about marketing, do they know how to market? If they know how to scale a business, do they know how to scale a business? If it's about building a great corporate culture, do they know how to create a great corporate culture? And so I'm looking at people going, are they actually really good at what they do?
Right.
But in the Christian space, it's always about can they communicate the same thing in a fresh way?
Yeah. Well, can I share my perspective for a second?
All right.
So this has been unreal for my communication over the last 5 years, learning about marketing and psychology. So in the marketing space, in the business space, you have a product and it is up to you to market it in a way that deeply connects with people.
Yes.
And so depending on who you're trying to reach, changes the way how you communicate what the product is about, its features, its benefits, etc. And so when business people come into a space, they are so sensitive about the people in the room, because it's not about I have a talk and this is my product and here it is. They're trying to figure out how to connect, because that's what their whole livelihood is based on, right? Mm-hmm. Marketing and sales of businesses, the ability to at scale connect with a lot of individuals. And so they're thinking about the psychology. So think about the room of people. What are their problems? What are their fears? What are their frustrations? What are their aspirations? Whereas I find a lot of preachers just have a message and they have a language, and then they'll come into every environment and every different room with different groups of people and bring the same message and the same way of saying it. In other words, the product doesn't change. And so therefore all they're doing is just talking about the product in the way that is, as opposed to bringing their message, the product, and marketing it in a different way that actually connects with the individual. And that's why I think business people are so good at speaking. And I would say this as a former pastor, so much more than pastors, because they're so other-centric. They know that if they cannot connect, it will not convert. And if it does not convert, the business ceases to exist.
I couldn't have said it better. Could you explain that to Erwin?
I understand it.
No.
I think it's a ruthless appreciation for the fact that if you do not convert, it won't exist. And that's the bottom line, right? Where I think in the church world, it's like, well, but that was nice.
Yeah, we think about the survival needs, right?
Right.
Churches will exist no matter how you communicate it and how well you communicate the message, because the scriptures teach that you're supposed to be a part of a church. And so even the quote unquote worst churches will still have attendance, but businesses don't get the same sympathy and empathy from people.
Right.
And so in order to sell a product, to exist, to scale and all of that, you have to be empathetic and connect with individuals.
Yeah, I think maybe some of it is a different perspective on who, if you can use this language, who the customer is.
Right.
For most people in the space of faith, their customer are Christians.
Yeah.
And so they craft a message in a way that's relevant and connecting to them.
Yeah.
But for me, my customer is the 8 billion people that have not met Jesus.
Right.
And the Christians are employees with me. I'm an employee. We're all employees. We're all here serving the customer.
Right.
We're just the person without Christ.
Yeah.
And so the language shifts, because when your customer is the person who already believes, it makes sense that the language matches their needs. When your customer is the person who has not yet come to believe, then you have to change your language. You have to change your approach toward communication, and the way that you bring a person to that moment where they see who Jesus is. And so I think some of it is just, we don't always have the same customer in mind.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do, I think, with the need you're trying to meet with the audience, right?
Yeah.
But I want to go back to the reinvention of Dan Bolton. So what was it? What was it like? What was it like that first jump, going from no longer have a job, and a low-paying job, which matters. It's not like you have a runway of things you can like transition on.
Oh no,
right?
I had 1 week's worth of pay coming, like literally.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then you're married with.
I had one kid at the time.
One kid at a time.
Yeah.
And then you decide to do, like, what was that first step?
Literally, let me walk you through the first step. So we didn't own a car, and someone gave us money the week before. Beautiful person, a part of our community, gave us money to buy a car. So that was step number one. Was day one, I bought a car, because previously up until then I was using a car that the church had lent me, and I didn't even own a laptop. So I bought a car that first day. I borrowed my wife Olivia's laptop, and I sat down. I was like, right, I need to start a business. And I did all the stuff you don't really need in the first, like I was doing the equivalent of like making the business cards.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I'm gonna build a website, and it's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
And eventually what I just realized was there were all of these people that trusted me enough to give me a shot. Mm-hmm. And so even though they didn't know Dan the marketer, they knew Dan the human. And I was able to reach out to people and have a really successful first month because I'd been building my reputation for so long, right? And when you think about like the online space, right? A personal brand is just your reputation at scale with people through the online world.
Yeah.
And so I was so grateful that I didn't realize that I'd been building my reputation up until this point, and that was going to help me in business, but that's exactly what happened. And it was really interesting because in that first 30 days, it was so challenging, but it was so exciting. And I was just filled with this delusional optimism. I think one of my gifts in life is that if I see someone else having something, I believe it's possible for me. And so there was...
Say that again, because that is a critical mind shift that people make.
Yeah, if I see someone else experiencing something, I believe it's possible for me. Mm-hmm. So there was a guy that has become a great friend of mine called Sam Ovens. And so he's made over $100 million in online consulting at this point. And now he's built a software business. But he was the guy in 2018 when I launched. And the perfect thing was he was from New Zealand. So he was now living in New York, making money online. And so I was looking at him, not knowing him personally, but going, well, if it's possible for that guy who came from Auckland, New Zealand, 2 hours away from where I'm living, I think it could be possible for me. Now, I wasn't thinking at that scale, but I was like, if he can make the millions, I can make the thousands. Like, I can figure this out.
Yeah.
And I think like that's been one of my, the biggest things for me, I'd say, and this is why I've loved working with you guys, is I think if I have a superpower, it's that I'm willing to be taught and willing to learn. And so then all I did is I bought that guy's course and I did everything he told me to do. And it actually worked.
How much is the course?
The course was $2,000 and I paid it on a credit card and I was terrified.
And how many, okay, so you talked about the first 30 days. Of your
so you violated a Dave Ramsey rule. You went into debt.
Well, I violated a personal rule. We'd never gone into debt before.
Wow.
So that was like this big moment of like, I don't have money. I don't know what to do. But I feel like I need to be a part of this course. And the hardest part of that was someone had already given me a bootlegged version of it. So I already had the whole course. And I remember going through the first module and my wife said it like this. She said, do you really think God is going to bless a business that starts out like this with you going through someone's bootleg version of the content? And so not only did I have to ignore, I already had the whole course for free. I put it on a credit card, which we'd never done. And then, and it was in US dollars. So it was like 3,500 New Zealand. It was insane. But I just went through and did everything he told me to do. And it actually worked. And I think there's so much to be said around innovation and creativity. And I think too many people don't innovate and don't create enough. But I also think when you're getting started, there's something just to be said about imitating and emulating.
Yeah.
I think people can create way too soon, and they look at someone else's business model or blueprint and they go, that's great, but I'm like a little bit different, or I'm going to try my own thing, and they try and blaze their own trail rather than follow through the trail that's already been blazed for them. And I think that was one of the great things for me, is I knew how much I didn't know, and I wasn't fooling myself that I was smarter than I was. And so I just did everything that coach told me, and then I bought another course eventually to scale to the next level, and I just did everything they taught me. And it's really only been the last 18 months or 2 years that I'm like, all right, I've been in the game for a while. How do I get creative and find my own flavor and find my own way? But I think those early days, it was literally just like, I need to be a sponge, I need to be a student, I need to learn, I need mentorship, and then I just need to do everything they say without, second guessing everything and overthinking it.
So you talked about the first 30 days. So where in the 30 days did you decide to buy the course? Was it in the first 30, or was it down the road after you had kind of...
That's a great question. No, it wasn't down the road. It was either just before, like as in days before, or like a week into it. I think what happened was I got 2 clients on my first day.
And what did those clients hire you to do?
Yeah.
Get real granular.
I'll get really granular. So first 30 days, I got 5 clients. The first 2 clients I got, one was a real estate agent that was looking for help with his social media. The reason he hired me is because I'd already given him advice, and he made $30,000 off one post that I told him to do. And then I was like, great, like you can hire me for $250 an hour, and we'll do a coaching session every week. He's like, fantastic. Then I worked with a personal trainer who was trying to figure out how to use social media to get clients online. So I was both taking my experience as youth pastor using social media, as well as everything I was learning in this course. So I was like one step ahead as a student. I was like the student teacher.
Yeah.
The third client was I took over the social media for a grocery store. So we had like a grocery store in our local area. And so I would go in with my iPhone and take photos and figure out like how do we do competitions and things like that. And they hired me for that. But the guy who was manager there went to my church, right? So these are all church connections, right?
Yeah.
The fourth client was a guy that I worked out with. And he owned a vehicle financing place. And I was like, there's this thing called Facebook ads. I think I can get you leads with Facebook ads. And he's like, great. And then I gave him a number, and he's like, where did you get that number? I was like, don't worry about it. Like, I was like, just making it up as I went. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be worth this. And then I was building a website for a construction company. Okay. So truly like doing everything. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think in the business space, there's a lot of talk around niching and focus. And I think in the early days, I think there's something to be said about becoming someone who is a jack of all trades, having a wide skill set. I think niching comes over time once you're clearer on the skill set you actually want to develop. But I think so many people, they try and create a one-page business plan type thing, and they go, I've never done this before, but I'm going to work with chiropractors, and I'm going to run a Facebook ads agency, and I'm going to do this without any knowledge. And so I think spreading myself thin in a good way was so helpful to cover so much ground and go, okay, now what's my next move? And I did that for about 6 to 8 months of really varied work. And it was like hard, and I was making money, but it was like every offer was different, every client was different. And then over the next year, what happened was I figured out my real power alley was working with business coaches. I'd worked with a number of them at that time. And so I just figured out basically an agency that we ran Facebook ads for business consultants who wanted more sales calls. So if you like think back a year previous, I was doing everything for everyone. And then the next piece was like I really productized a service. So I really dialed in like one system and became one of the best at this particular skill set. So if you had a $27 ebook that you sold, fantastic, we couldn't help you. If you had a physical product that you sold, like we weren't the people. We only helped business consultants and experts get more sales calls with webinars. And then that kind of launched into the next couple of years and took us through COVID and all of that. And
Amazing. So that first jump, you really just said, anything you can do, I'm going to try it. Anything you need, I'm going to do it.
And there was nothing below me. I was like, I need to make money. I have a wife. I have a kid. I'm willing to do anything. And so like I think back to like what I was charging at that time, the prices, all of that. It was making it.
We
like,
should have definitely got in earlier. You're expensive now.
Right. Well, you're
not $250 an hour. That's for sure.
I know, New Zealand dollars, right?
Yeah.
And so
yeah, we're paying you in American dollars.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think you're paying an Indonesian rupiah.
I think we need to change the currency to Bali.
Yeah. And so we're all familiar with Alex Hormozi, right?
Yeah,
And here's this amazing book. Everyone should read it if they're interested in business, called $100 Million Offers.
Yeah.
But the thesis of that book is you need to create an offer so good that people feel stupid saying no to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually easier said. Like it's actually easy, meaning like you figure out a problem that you can solve and then you just over deliver. Like in other words, you don't figure out like, how am I going to handle 20 clients when you have one? You just go, what am I willing to do for the next client in order to get this one over the line?
Yeah.
You might be willing to do twice the amount of work that you're willing to do for client number 10, but it's going to help you build momentum and find skills and improve your offer. Yeah. And so I think there was just nothing I wasn't willing to do. Like I would have a client that's like, I need to hire someone for Facebook ads. Do you know anyone? I'm like, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. And then like, I need to like hire a content agency. I'm like, I'll do it. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And until I knew what I could and couldn't do and did and didn't want to do, I just did everything. Yeah,
there's something you said that you mentioned a few minutes ago. You said nothing was beneath you.
Right.
And I think that's something that's so interesting because that coupled with the idea that you bring so much value to people before you ever charge them.
Right.
Right. How many times did we meet where it was just like, I have nothing. You literally say this, I want nothing from you.
Yeah.
Just want to be a friend and help you succeed.
Yeah.
And it was such a natural decision when I was like, well, should we hire Dan? I was like, yes, we're hiring Dan for everything he's done, not for everything he's going to do.
Right.
And that's something that you've kind of always been a part of your world of you pay people for to take time off, not to work more for you. And can you walk us through kind of how you got to that space and maybe how that might connect?
Yeah, especially when you're in like a volunteer space like the church. You know, we always hired from within here. I would hire the person who was volunteering so much that I didn't know how they were sleeping. You know, I didn't know how they're getting time with their wife and their kids. And so literally in my hiring meeting, I would say, hey, I'm not paying you to do anything more than you're doing. I'm actually paying you so you can have time to spend with your family because you're already doing everything I want you to do. And it's to me, it's such an interesting shift because I've had other situations where staff people have come and said, hey, can I take on this other project while I'm working here? Because that would be like my passion project. And I said, go get hired by them and let us be your passion project because I want the energy of your passion.
Right.
Because you'll give more creativity and more imagination and more time to the thing that you're actually passionate about. So if we're not your passion project, we're the wrong place to be at. And so I would hire people in the sense that they were volunteers working another full-time job and we were their passion project. And what was happening at Mosaic was their passion project. And it was such a joy to release that person's time. You know, and you were already doing everything for us that we hired you to do. I can't think of anything that you added. You just kept doing the same thing. You just, on one day you're doing it for free. And then the next day you're our highest paid consultant in my history. And I've never blinked twice. Like, in fact, at one point, I think you sent us a text, hey, if I'm no longer of value or if you don't need me anymore, I'm happy just to go back to being a volunteer. I mean, Aaron talked about it for like 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Like saying like, no, I don't want Google anymore. No, I still want Google. I still would like my iPhone. No, I think, and that's, sorry, you're going to cut you off. No, but you're incredibly skilled at bringing value. And continually bringing value. So when you gave us the roadmap for Art of Communication, really, we had already come up with the idea of like doing courses, but I didn't know what to do beyond that. How do you continually add value and hunt down new value to bring?
Yeah, so it's actually a really easy answer for me. I'm not looking for things I'm passionate about. I'm looking to bring passion to what I'm doing.
Okay.
Right, and I think I was thinking about this today. There are huge elements of what I do, not so much for you guys, and I'm not saying this because you're here, like I really enjoy the high level stuff. I still work with like really beginning people. And so like just imagine like I've done thousands of hours of coaching over the last 5.5 years. Not an exaggeration, I work with 800 clients. I still work with like 30 one-to-one clients, right? And so I have questions that I have answered in the hundreds of times, like whether it's someone second guessing themselves and they're like, oh, what if I create content online and people are going to like judge me? And I'm like walking them through it and things like that. And so there are huge areas of my business that I'm like not passionate about. I'm like, man, I'm sick of these topics. Like I want to graduate. I want to but the thing that I am passionate about is helping people. And so when I started to realize that I am able to reshape people's identity, because if you were to ask me like, what am I here on earth to do? I think I'm here on earth to help people remember who they are and what they're living for, right? And so it was true as a pastor, it's true as a business coach. And so when I realized that every time I coach someone, it's an opportunity to reshape the way they think about themselves and the way that they see themselves in the world and their worldview and their self-image. I can't believe I get paid to do that. Like this is really heavy. But like I was thinking today, there's literal slaves in the world. Like that have no freedom, that have to do back-breaking work that they hate. And firstly, if we have any freedom at all, right? We have a house over our head, right? We have food in the cupboard, we have running water. That's unreal. And then many of us get to actually do things we kind of like. Like, firstly, that's unreal. Like, I can't believe that we get to live that life. And so any day that I get to have any level of autonomy about what my life looks like, this is a good day, because many people don't get that. And so I think for me, it's just this immense perspective of like, yeah, there are so many days that like I'm creating modules or showing up to calls or whatever. But I'm like, man, I can't believe I get to live this life. I can't believe that I'm so lucky to have been born where I was born, to have the mentors when I was 10, 11, 12, to live this life. And so when I think about the times that I'm struggling to add value to people, it's because I'm too much in my own stuff, and I'm focused on what I feel like I have to do out of obligation versus what I get to do out of privilege.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I felt like I brought a heavy talk there, but it's like, but you asked the question. I think like that's the key for me, is like the value thing is less strategic. It's less like, how can I add value? It's more like, how can I just help this person be in less pain? Because like, it doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire and you're having money problems or you're in poverty. The stress can be at similar levels, right? And so whatever people are going through real pain. And I think for me, like I try and live this painkiller life. I don't want to be a vitamin in people's lives, this nice to have. I don't want what I sell to be that. Relationally, I don't want to be that. I want to be this immense value add that I feel like I'm bringing not so much pain relief, right? Of course, it's just friendship sometimes, but really just trying to solve actual problems for people, as opposed to like just doing fluffy stuff or just being so lost in the money, so lost in the goals, so lost in the outcomes that I forget about the beauty of loving the process.
Yeah. I mean, I texted you the other night, and I was like, a hard day for me, and I said, I can't believe we get to live this life. You know, and I was like, I could have been more stressed, like anxiety filled and exhausted. Yeah. And then it was just like, when I got down to it, it was like, I get to sleep in my bed tonight. Dude. And tomorrow I get to wake up and go do a bunch of stuff we never thought we could do last year. Yeah. And then the year before. But, you know, we talk about real slaves in the world, and it's such a real thing, and it's heartbreaking. But then there's real people who are walking around us every day who are a slave to their own world. Yeah. Who need, like, I have this book in front of us, and this is not a sales thing, but this is the crux of this entire podcast, is making that mind shift and helping people make that mental switch where they can free themselves from being inside the matrix. Yeah. And we joke about that all the time, being like, get them out of the matrix. We got to get them out of the matrix.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, it's funny, last night at the LAFC game, I had a couple of friends there, and one of the guys, David, he owns a company that has like 20, 30 companies inside of it.
Yeah, he owns a conglomerate.
Yeah. And he just had a $4.2 billion settlement with the DOJ, and so he's debt free. And, you know, and I'd forgotten this. But last night he said, you know why I trust you, and I said, no, and he goes, it was like 5 years ago I was in Dubai and I was working on a deal. It was like, you know, I don't know if it was like $1 billion deal or something like that, and it was going bad. It was all tanking, and I was stressed out and overwhelmed and on medication and all this stuff, and I text you because I thought I'll text Erwin because he'll pray for me and he'll comfort me. And I remember getting this text in the middle of the night. I didn't remember it was him 5 years ago. But when he said Dubai, I remembered the text. And he said, I sent you this text in the middle of the night, and you responded right away. And instead of saying, hey, I'm praying for you and it's going to be okay, you told me to man up and put my big boy pants on. and I really just asked him a series of questions. Yeah. I said, you're in Dubai? And he goes, yeah. One of them was like beautiful cities in the world. He goes, yeah. And you're working on like a $billion deal? And he goes, yeah. You mean like a deal that very few people in the world ever get to work on? He goes, yeah. Your wife's still with you? Yeah. Your kid's okay? Yeah. So you're getting to travel the world, work on $1 billion deals. You know how good your life is. And he reminded me last night, he goes, when you did that to me, and it shook me because I wanted comfort, but you called me out and reminded me how good my life was. He goes, and the next day I closed that deal. And I don't think there are billions of enough dollars sometimes to cause us to always remember how good life is.
Yeah.
You know, and there are people who struggle with poverty who wake up feeling they have a great life.
Yeah.
And people who have billions who feel like their life is miserable. And so one of the things, you know, I think we've all learned is that all the stuff in the world doesn't change that internal perspective. You have to do that, you know, and when you had nothing and you didn't have a car and you had a wife and, you know, a kid and you're trying to make things work, you had to have incredible anxiety in that process. And yet you always do have this, it seems like an indomitable kind of hope in you, Dan. You know, and I know you've gone back and forth. You told me you were drinking every day and you were struggling. And so I think you're the real life tension of, you know, trying to create a life that you want. Your inner world sometimes a disaster and you're trying to catch up with it. How do you find a rhythm where you make sure that your inner world isn't chasing behind your outer world?
One of the things that has been most helpful for me over the last few years is learning like who I am and who I'm not. And I think we oftentimes live within labels like entrepreneur, pastor. The problem is that it's always so much nuance. Like if there was one word that I would use to describe me, it's hybrid. Right? It's like, I'm not a petrol car, I'm not an electrical car, like I'm both, right? And so, you know, one of the things that was really hard for me for so long was I'm a creative at heart. Like I grew up, all I wanted to do was play music. In fact, when I was 17, our plan was, me and this group of friends was like, we're going to move to LA and play music and go to Mosaic. Right. That was like 2007. That was a little legit plan. And then those guys went off and got like real jobs.
They sold out.
They sold out. University. And so this whole idea of labels, like it was so challenging for me because when I stepped into entrepreneurship, I just started listening to the loudest entrepreneurs that had like this is what entrepreneurship looked like. And so I was this creative at heart, and then I was spending all days in meetings and back-to-back Zoom calls and running teams and things like that. And it wasn't until I became really self-aware of the things that I'm really good at and things I'm not good at. Like I need a lot of time free in my calendar to think and reflect. I think it's one of my greatest strengths is like learning, thinking, and reflecting. The less time I have for that, the less energy I have in myself, the greater the pain, the greater the level of stress. And there was a great quote by someone called Brooke Castillo. She's like the top life coach in the world. She made something like 52 million last year. She's unreal. And she said, burnout doesn't come from the amount of hours you work, but by the core emotion fueling your work. Right? So we've all met people who got burnt out working 20 hours a week. And you're like, sorry, how? Yeah. But because it's the emotion fueling the work. And so for me, the emotion fueling the work was like insecurity and ego, thinking I had to become someone I'm not. And so even thinking about speaking at the arena this week, there were so many moments of the last few weeks I was waiting for you guys to cancel me. And I was going to be like relieved. I was like, I'll just come as an attendee. Let's go. Because I think it's so many of us are living from the outside in. Yeah. And so we're thinking about, getting caught in these moments of thinking about how can I look cool at the arena and how can I be impressive rather than like, how can I be an awesome version of Dan Bolton? And I think the more that I've worked from the outside in, the more stressed the inside became, right? And the more I started to take care of myself first and understanding that like, unless I build a business that serves my life rather than creating a life that has to serve my business, I'll never be able to fully experience that level of peace. And so I'm very much on the journey, but like, I don't live a stressed life. Like I was sitting down with someone a few weeks ago and they used to do $1 billion a year in real estate sales, like their agency. And they've since had this huge transformation of health, both inside and out. And one of the things he was saying to me on a call a few weeks ago is he said, I believe that I'm going to take my business to like $1 million a week in this education space. He said, but there are two things I'm unwilling to do. I'm unwilling to work more than 20 hours a week because of the commitments I have for my family. The second thing is I'm unwilling to let any level of bad stress into my life. Now there's the good stress that stretches us, that causes us to grow. But I think I've made that same commitment of like, I'm unwilling to create a business and put myself in positions that I have to live in a state of bad stress. And I think in doing that, it's helped so much bring peace and joy and health into the center of who I am. But it came from the self-awareness of realizing I was trying to live as someone I wasn't. I was trying to live someone else's version of success, creating a business that other people were proud of that I wasn't proud of, creating a schedule that other people would have loved that I hated. And I think really getting self-aware and taking account of who I am, my skill set, my personalities. I'm not you. I'm not Alex Hormozi. I'm not Gary Vee. So who's Dan Bolton? And then leaning into that conversation.
I love that. Well, I love who Dan Bolton is. You know, tonight I have a lot of the men that are in my mastermind coming to my house. Going to be grilling baby back ribs, whole chickens, ribeyes. I love the fact that my mastermind comes into my house, and so I'm going to have to excuse myself because I got to go cook.
Are you leaving? This is you exiting? Are you serious right now? This is how you do this to us?
And,
You're abandoning us.
How has that showed up for you? Like when you think about all the hats that you've worn over the years, and I think like being your friend for a decade now. I think there was a long season where there was like you were the pastor's son. And then you were like, maybe I'm going to walk that same path, and then you're in fashion and like, and now I think you've found a really sweet spot. Like, what does that look like for you in terms of your own personal evolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really unique. I think 2019 was a really interesting year because we had planted churches, many of them. We went from like one single, campus in Hollywood to 8 around the world, which was for us a big deal. And I led one of my own, which I thought was really kind of crazy.
Shout out Venice.
Shout out Venice, yeah, Mosaic Venice, and it was amazing. And it was one of the most special experiences of my life, and it also felt like one of those moments where I wasn't gonna try to recreate again, And not to say that it won't happen in the future, but for me in that moment, it felt okay during COVID to go, okay, I got to say goodbye to this. And shout out to like the phenomenal people that journeyed with us for 5 years. Like it was such a fun season, but it was hard to build something to the point where, we had a cool little moment where we had guys like flying in on jets to like, cause their daughters were like, and their sons were like, we got to go to Venice.
No way.
And so just getting like crazy DMs and crazy videos and then just having people life changing like in that city, in that community. And so that was really special, and then I think from that point, the switch in COVID was just survival a little bit. It was like, I'm sick of asking people to give to something that we're trying to build. I want to be someone who could just give to what we want to build and having a value and knowing our value set and our generosity. And I convinced him and just said like, hey, if we're some of the most generous people I know, why aren't we wealthier? And just for the savage reason of like, I want to give more money away. I want to be more generous. I want to be able to help the people in my world. And we talked about this. Like initially I had this crazy plan of like buying a house for every single person that I loved, that we could like create a real estate thing and just all the crazy ideas. And then it's kind of gone to a place now where I'm like, I love to create. I love to build brands. I love to build things. And that's my favorite person in the world, my dad. And so getting to build into a brand that I really believe in has been like a life calling, So to be able to help him pivot to go, this is a new avenue, a new place to influence business leaders, to influence designers and coaches and have this consulting biz has been phenomenal. It's been a really a journey of unknown. I hate talking about the business. Like, in fact, like when I go out and I will not talk about work.
Yeah.
I met someone, they're like, what do you do? And I was like, I do business. And they were like, and I was with my, with my situationship, and they were like, tell them what you do. And I was like, no. And like my prerequisite is I do not talk about what I do outside of the people that I think we would work with.
Yeah.
It was the opposite of you. You talk about it with everyone. My dad is the biggest evangelist of everything that we do. I will only talk about it with people that I think it actually makes sense to talk about it with. And so I'm figuring out my identity. Identity's always been an issue.
Right.
And being confident in my identity has always been an issue. But I think this week, even launching the arena, having these people flying from around the world, having this special community that we've built for the last 4 months, it's really helped that, So I think figuring out the space in which we bring value has been redefined.
I think that's like such an underrated point that so many of us think that reinvention or transition is so clear cut. So you think about it in terms of a job, you finish one day, you start another job. The challenge is when life is not that clean and clear. So think about beliefs. It's like, are you Republican or Democrat? It's like, depends which day, dude. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but it's like,
well, you're neither.
I'm
you live
neither.
in Bali.
I live in Bali.
You're the best of both worlds. No one.
But I think like we like to black and white life to a point that's unrealistic.
We live within labels.
Yeah.
You know, it's such an interesting like ideology and in reality and existence that whether it's race, whether it's genre, whether it's location and street and neighborhood, like we live by labels. We are serial numbers. To some degree, right?
Yeah.
So breaking outside of that ideology and that reality takes time.
Yeah.
For me, there was a mourning process for sure. It was easier with COVID because it was like, hey, this was this beautiful thing you built in Venice. It's over now. There's no choice.
Right.
You know, the government shut down everything in LA. LA was like locked down. There's nothing I could do. So you had to reinvent to survive. And that for me was amazing because I think it helped me understand, I can survive.
Yeah.
And not only survive, I can thrive. Yeah. And not only thrive, I can create. And then create a space where more people can come in and join us.
Yeah.
And that I think for me and for us, me and my dad, I think that's the whole point. It's like we don't just like doing this life. We don't want to just make money to make money. We want to do it to actually build a world in which the world gets better.
Yeah.
And create a positive community in that way. But reinventing yourself is scary. And I think it's easy to look back and go, I did it.
Of course.
Versus being like, I'm doing it and this sucks. you know? And I even, you know, I feel like after every phone call that I have, I'm calling 3 or 4 people that are my friends and going like, here's some of the, like distributing the information that you give to me on the gray market. I'm the bootleg. God bless my business. I send everyone back to you. I'm like, you want the real thing? I'm giving you the fake Yeezys. Go to the right guy.
But I think not getting caught in the overthinking that we need to be like, I was talking to a friend recently and he was telling me about his diet. And he was like, I'm a medicinal meat eating vegan. And I was like, tell me more about that. And he's like, well, I think eating animals is like pretty bad. And so I want to minimize it, but it seems like meat's really good for me. And so I'm like 80 to 90% vegan. And like 10% of the time I'll eat meat when I feel like my body needs me to.
Yeah.
And I found that approach so refreshing because here is a guy living in 2 tensions.
Yeah.
I don't want to eat animals, but they also seem to be really good for me. And so therefore, this is the middle ground of the tension I'm living within.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to get so comfortable in that place of the unknown and the mystery of things. Like if you think about belief systems, like who is God? Like, bro, I'm figuring this thing out. Like I don't know. Like I don't fit within this prescribed label of like I'm this denomination. I have no idea. But if I had to wait to figure it all out, I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't be able to share my faith. I wouldn't be able to live out of conviction that God is real and that he wants me to do something with my life. If I waited to learn everything about business, I could never help anyone with business.
Right.
And I think it's like that challenge of like our identity is both in the now and in the then. It's both in the who we are and in the who we're becoming. And it's in that tension that we live our life.
Yeah. So how did you reconcile not knowing nearly enough and yet coaching people who needed you to know?
Yeah, well, this is so much of this is psychology, right? It's like what's going on? Mindshift. Shout out Mindshift.
Yeah, no. If you haven't pre-ordered it, you need ordered it. You need to order it now.
But so your life is built on a series of mind shifts, right? For better or for worse, right? You could have a mind shift that's negative, right? Where you could think lesser of yourself. And so much of my life I have spent cultivating my mindset because I realized when I was younger that there was the only thing that was going to get me out of the perils of everything I was going through and the path I was going down, right? And so much of my life early on was like doom and gloom. Like I was seeing the future of the path I could go down. And so I realized like so much of what I had to do was figure out how to get out. And so I became a personal development junkie alongside like going to church and things like that. I started reading big books at a really young age. From like 18 to 22, I was probably reading a book a week. And so when it came to business, to answer your question of like what got me through that and the transition to reinvention, I just had a number of core beliefs. So like firstly, I think my mind is mostly a good place. Like it's a pretty healthy spot because I spent so long cultivating it. But I adopted a few beliefs that were really helpful. My number one belief was like I just believe in my ability to figure it out. And I think like learning is one of those meta skills that if you acquire the skill of learning and a passion for learning, you can't go wrong. So there's like nothing that I feel like I can't learn. Like I can play 2 instruments pretty well. I can do handstand walks, even as a bigger guy. I can squat like 400 pounds and deadlift 500. Like I've got all these skill sets that seem interconnected, but the meta skill set is learning. Yeah. Like it's my ability to like go look at gym tutorials and figure out like the exact right way to do a deadlift and a squat. Yeah. And so I think like when it came to business, it was the same approach. I was like, I can figure this out. And so like the first skill I got really good at was Facebook ads. And it's because I watched and rewatched and learned everything I could about Facebook ads when it came to modules and YouTube, both paid stuff and free stuff. And I think that's a really underrated understanding, is that whatever challenge you're facing in life, chances are the answer is in a book somewhere. Or now it's on YouTube, right? Which is even better. And I think that was a huge belief that I was like, people have gone before me. I'm like early-ish in the internet make money online era, but I'm not the earliest. And so there are people out there that I can either pay for advice or watch videos online or read books that have got the knowledge that I need. And so I was just unrelenting in finding that knowledge and figuring it out. And so whether it was like texting friends, whether it was hiring mentors, whether it was working with coaches and courses, like at this point I've probably spent $400,000 in the last few years on my own education, right? Which is ironic from a high school dropout. I'm like more passionate about education than ever, but in a different
more money than a university student in the US,
100%.
Which is interesting because it's a different set of value set, right? Because it's not institutionalized. Yeah, that you go and it's the Wild West. You had to go and find it, and then choose it. Yeah, versus getting accepted to it and then feeding into it. Yeah, which is I think is a different mindset, right? Because I think especially in the Western or like in the US, like you get accepted to these universities and then they put you on a track, and the track usually leads to I have no idea what I want to do with my life. Yep. Right, unless it's very specific where you're going into being a lawyer or a doctor or a specific thing. You oftentimes I think people leave going, I don't know what I just did for 4 years other than learn a bunch of things that maybe might be useful and maybe not. Yeah. I remember my freshman year at my university, I was in accounting 101, and I sat there for 5 minutes. I did roll call. And then he drew something on the board, and I looked at that, and it looked like hieroglyphics to me. And I'm terrible with math. And I got up and walked out. And he said, "McManus, where are you going?" I said, "I realized that I found an accountant on Google, and I'll hire him." And he just laughed. I said, "I think I'm a creative." And I walked out, and I switched my major, and then I dropped out 2 years later. Yeah. Realizing that the things I can learn, I can go and find on my own. Yeah. How important is it for you, that journey? Because I think if it had just been given to you, we wouldn't have seen it the same way.
100%. So like this reminds me of when I was speaking in high schools. Yeah. So when I was both at teenage level and a little bit older, I was working in the church. I would speak in high schools, like connected to the church and things like that. And I remember reading